Test, test, audio test. Okay, we are live on YouTube.
Ready to go?
Yep.
Turn on your mics, kids. Signal it.
All right, we'd like to welcome everybody to the North Logan City Planning Commission meeting today. We'll begin with our opening ceremonies. Deidre with the pledge and Porter with the prayer.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Dear Father in heaven, we bow our heads at the start of this meeting to thank Thee for this opportunity that we have to gather together as citizens of North Logan and to exercise our civic rights and civic duties to have public discourse on our community and the progress that we want to see and want to make here. Pray that we'll be able to have open discussion, we'll have open minds to all differing viewpoints, that we can come to good conclusions, things that will further the best interest of our community. We thank Thee for the many blessings that we enjoy in this free country. We're grateful for the men and women who sacrifice their time and their lives, their careers to protect our freedoms, and ask Thee to bless them. We thank Thee again for all the many blessings we receive at Thy hand. Say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. All right, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Excellent. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. I'll entertain a motion as well to approve the minutes of 2 prior meetings.
I move that we adopt those minutes.
Second.
Great. Motion second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. Thank you. Scott, any follow-up issues and items or issues from previous meetings?
Yeah, just a quick update. City Council last night moved to approve the text amendments to the 2500 North Gateway corridor. So those amendments that we've been working on for the past 6 months were approved. We'll work on getting those codified. But pursuant to that having been adopted, we'll move forward with some adjustments to the zoning on that 2500 North corridor. So we'll likely have a public hearing for that item at our next meeting. So we'll issue public notice and have that ready for our next discussion. So that's on the horizon, just by way of update. And then also the Harvest Acre subdivision went to council last night. Their development agreement for that subdivision connecting 2500 North between 12th and 16th East, that was approved as well. So the next step on that will be a final plat application submitted to the DRC for final review before it goes forward with recording or infrastructure installing. So that's on the horizon. But those are the only updates I have for the
Great.
commission.
Thank you. The next item is our consent agenda. Does anyone wish to remove this item from the consent agenda and discuss it?
I would just make a motion to approve the consent item.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you. Our first item of regular business tonight is a public hearing regarding the Ashbourne Mixed-Use City Center rezone and master development plan. Scott, if you'll take us through the staff report, and then after that, if the applicant's here, we'll give them some time to address if they'd like.
Absolutely. Okay, so this item on the agenda is it's a zoning map amendment, which is a term we use for a rezone application. This item, because it is a rezone application, is a legislative item. So the Planning Commission reviews it for its merits. And based on discussion, it could be this meeting, next meeting, several meetings, but eventually the Planning Commission, their role is to make a recommendation to City Council. The City Council is the legislative authority, and they are the ones to make any final decisions on this item. So just so everybody understands, the Planning Commission reviews it, and then we'll pass a recommendation when they're ready to City Council. So everybody understands the nature of this particular item. To start, I wanted to give just a quick historical synopsis for everybody in the room to understand where we are and where we came from in relation to this item. So, beginning back in 2008, the city went through a general plan update, and a general plan is essentially a master plan for the entire city. It's a very broad plan. And it's a long horizon plan with about a 20-year planning horizon to identify various priorities for a city. Land use, transportation, parks, recreation, trails, utilities. It's a very large planning document. And a city is required by the state of Utah to go through this planning effort every 5 to 10 years or so. And in 2008, the city initially had envisioned the need for its own downtown. As many of us understand, North Logan City, we essentially have a main street that is an extension of a UDOT corridor, Highway 91. And many of our residents never felt like North Logan ever had a true downtown. We certainly didn't think that Main Street was our downtown either. So back in 2008, the vision was hatched that we need to create our own little city center. And that city center was envisioned somewhere in the area between 1800 North and 2200 North, and between 2nd East and 4th East, with a few parcels surrounding that area being transition zones. So in 2008, that idea was born. The public was excited to see a downtown at some point come to fruition. And then the years passed and not a whole lot changed. We were still a pretty rural community. And then in 2013, the city went through an update to the general plan, as we would normally do every 5 to 10 years. We would go and we would update our general plan. So that process in 2013 asked the same question: do we still envision a downtown? Is this still something that the public would like to see? And that vision held true. The city center concept was by and large retained. There was still a core that was anticipated with some perimeter parcels for transition purposes. And following the 2013 update, a lot of the zoning in the city center was established for some city center development. And a lot of housing developments came to fruition. We got the Four Seasons apartments. We got several townhomes. We got some 55 plus neighborhoods that were installed in this area. And as the years went past, we went between 2013 and 2023 without a general plan update. So we were pretty long in the tooth, ready for an update to our general plan. And in 23, the city embarked on that process again. And we went through and we asked that same question: do we still envision a city center? Is this still something that we would like to see come to fruition? We already have a few parcels that had developed, but the core of the city center hadn't yet taken flight. And so we were curious: is this still a viable vision? Is this still something we want to see come to fruition? And so the city at that time, as we were going through that 2023 update to the general plan, we decided to commission a separate standalone city center master plan, which is essentially a small area plan that is more specifically looking at that area of town. And we went through and we created a city center master plan with our general plan. Both of those plans went through public participation, public open houses, public hearings, public comment periods, surveys, and ultimately were adopted in early 2025. So this exhibit that you see on the screen here, this is the primary exhibit from the 2025 general plan as it was adopted. This map is what we call our future land use map. And a future land use map is not a zoning map, but it identifies areas of the city that have unique points of consideration, unique goals, desired outcomes. And each area has a separate chapter in the general plan that spells out those desired aspirations. And so when you look at this area that I mentioned before, between 1800 North, 2200 North, First East and, Second East and Fourth East here. And then a couple of these perimeter parcels that are shown in red, those were added to the boundary of the city center. They were already part of the city center vision from 2008 carried forward. But you can see that that is essentially this planning area, this future land use district that has unique goals. So I mention that because this is the highest level of planning, very broad from a citywide planning perspective. And then I'm going to hop over to, this is the city center master plan. Again, there's a lot of pages and a lot of analysis and a lot of data that goes into this, but this exhibit here on the right was essentially an effort from many workshops with the Planning Commission, with the public, with stakeholders to identify what we call a preferred land use plan. And a preferred land use plan is trying to understand where do we put certain land uses, what should happen on certain parcels. And again, this follows the same footprint that you saw on the previous image. We got Second East, Fourth East, 2200 North, 1800 North down here. And the different colors represent different types of land uses. So specific to this application, you'll see in this top right-hand corner, this is the subject property for this rezone request. And in the city center master plan, we had anticipated that this property would be a transition property in nature. The core of the city center was the 80 acres in this central quadrant. And this subject property represented a transition between the existing single-family neighborhoods further to the east, and then the higher intensity development further to the west and south. This color yellow denotes single-family detached, so that's single-family residential that we're most familiar with. And the purple represents a mixed use. A mixed use is essentially a mixing of uses, potentially some office, retail, some attached housing as well as anticipated there. So that was, as we drilled down from the high general plan down to the more specific city center master plan, what was envisioned for this area between 2008 and then fast forward all the way to 2025. Okay. Now, lastly, as we get even more granular in the planning effort, this exhibit here represents the form-based code. So everything we've seen so far is the planning and the policy direction that led to the code. So this is the form-based code. This is the regulatory document for any development in the city center if this city center mixed-use zoning is applied to the properties. So if a zone is granted, then this is the regulatory document that would have to be adhered to for any development. Again, this footprint looks familiar. You'll see there's a couple of colors. The subject property being here on the right-hand side. This is the eastern transition area within the city center. So we're getting even more granular. This area east of Fourth East has specific goals. Again, most of them are transitional in nature. And then in the center, this blue, the city center core is where the most intense development is anticipated, the core of our downtown. And then the west side transition is what you see on the left, on the west side. And again, it has other unique goals that would help it transition into Main Street and the vehicularly oriented commercial nature of Main Street. So we started very broad and now we're very granular in the planning that has taken place up to this point. So this particular rezone request is requesting that we change the property's zoning from the existing single-family residential R112 to the city center mixed-use zoning classification. Within that city center mixed-use zoning classification, it would be applied the east side transition designation. Okay. So long story short, that is the request. That is what they are looking to adjust this property to. And I'm going to hop over to the staff report. This is a more specific analysis of the request from city staff. And we've talked about several of these items already, but I'll kind of scroll through. Again, this is our subject property here just to the south of Alpine Orthopedics and the Specialty Hospital. It's a 9.9 acre parcel there. On the east side, you'll see the Twin Ditch Canal. that is on its eastern boundary. Okay, I want to scroll down here. This is the existing zoning. I'm going to zoom in for everybody's benefit. The existing zoning, like I'd mentioned, is R112, single-family residential. The 12 means 12,000 square foot lots, or essentially quarter acre single-family is what that classification is currently. You'll see to the north, we have a hospital zone. To the west, we have a mixed-use general zone. To the south, we have an attached housing. It's called MR7. And then to the east, there's an RE1, which is residential estate 1 acre. Something of note, and as you'll notice, even further to the north and further to the east, you'll see quite a bit of R112. And R112, again, single-family residential. I do want to hop back over just briefly to the general plan's future land use map. Again, this is the very broad policy document. And you'll see that east of the subject property is what we call the residential core 2 district, future land use district. And when you look at the goals and policies for the residential core 2 district, it does anticipate just a moderate uptake in development opportunity, not wholesale up zones, not a whole bunch of attached housing, but just a moderate uptick where maybe there's some infill from place to place where it would make sense. A lot of this area is already developed, but there are some small opportunities where RE1 zone would be considered for a zone change to something maybe a little bit smaller. Okay, I'm gonna hop back over. So it's kind of interesting, this RE1 is kind of already in an area where the density and the existing zoning surrounding it is quite a bit more dense. This is a holdover zone from the original zoning that was applied back in the 70s. It just hasn't changed ever since. Okay, as we scroll down, here's a side-by-side comparison that we looked at again. On the left, city center master plan. On the right, form-based code. Okay, in the use table, this is something that's important to understand. The R112 zone, the single-family residential zone, primarily is a single-family residential land use permission. We would anticipate primarily seeing single-family homes, but in the R112 zone, we do still allow for some business opportunities. There are schools and churches and home-based businesses and things like that that you'll see in these residential zones. But what you see on the screen here is the permitted and not permitted zones in the east side transition area of the form-based code. And you'll notice that a lot of it is a bunch of N's, which means not permitted, but what is permitted in this area of east side transition is residential, education and training, neighborhood service, professional office, and home occupation. And then some residential amenities and leasing, like leasing offices, utilities and infrastructure, and then open space. So it's pretty specific. It's residential, maybe a little bit of office space, maybe some residential service types of uses. It's pretty limited in that regard. Okay, in this Eastside Transition District, there are only a handful of different building types that are permitted. We have a general building, a row building, and a yard building. And this code it's a form-based code, so it's not like the traditional Euclidean zoning that a lot of us are familiar with. This code is primarily focused on what does it look like. We want good aesthetics and we want high quality development that can change use perhaps over the years as our needs may change, but we want the building and we want the core of the development to be aesthetically pleasing and be a timeless development pattern. So as we get into the master development plan, this is submitted by the applicant as an intention, kind of signaling the intention of what they would like to do if the zoning is granted to them. And what we see here is a mixed use site plan. And starting from the east, we see that there are single family residential yard buildings. So it's kind of smaller cottage single family homes. And then as you transition westward, you'll see that the majority of the core is what we call row buildings and essentially a 3-story townhome. And then on this southwest corner is some live-work units, so primarily residential with some small commercial in the lower level. And then on the far west side is what we call a general building, which is kind of a traditional office building with maybe some services in there. Okay, so that's the high level master development plan for this proposed project. As we scroll further down, there are some architectural intentions that are provided by the applicant. Again, the form-based code is very focused on aesthetics. It anticipates a timeless design style. The code mentions a New England style architecture because it represents a timeless design style. And this first image is what is intended by the commercial buildings that would front on 4th East. Further down, these are the row buildings that you would see internally to the project. And what we have not seen is necessarily what the yard building intention would look like. So that's something that we would want to take a look at some point. Okay, I'm gonna scroll back up. The form-based code does require that a development in the city center not use only one building type. It's required to have at least 2 or 3 building types where not one building type is more than 2/3 of the development. So that's what is anticipated here to mix it up a little bit. Okay, a couple of things that we need to talk about. We need to talk about traffic and parking. Obviously, those are some very important details that people are most concerned about when we look at higher intensity development. As part of this project, we've asked that a traffic impact study be commissioned and supplied to the city, and that project is complete, but has been submitted to the city and needs to be reviewed. So that's something that is pending, and we'd recommend the Planning Commission take a look at that when it is provided. But looking at parking, this is something that I think everybody is very acutely aware is a problem in the area. I can't imagine, I can't even describe how many phone calls we get at the city with concerns about the Three Peak Medical Building just to the west here. So that is not lost on the city by any stretch of the imagination. Something that the applicant has proposed, and I think is worth mentioning, is in the far northwest corner. You'll see that there's a parking lot with 19 parking stalls. This is being proposed as an option for those vehicles that are currently parked on the street to park off the street. Now, to be clear, the city cannot require this of any development. This is a goodwill, good faith proposal to help solve some of this off-street parking in the area, and I think that's something worth mentioning. Now, internally to the site, that's another point of consideration. We want to make sure that we don't run into the same issues that we see in some of these other areas. And one of the recommendations in the staff report is that we have the developer clarify some of the parking figures that are provided. Some of the numbers didn't add up. As I kind of was looking through this and doing kind of a separate analysis, I had calculated based on the city's code that they would need at least 435 spaces for the development. And as depicted on this site plan, we're seeing 450. So we're showing a surplus of about 15, but which one's the 19? It does. Yep. So it does not include the single-family homes. Presumably they would have a garage and garage or driveway parking available to them. I was primarily looking at the attached housing and the commercial here. And so I believe the intent behind this is to comply with about a 15 lot or stall surplus. But again, the devil's in the details. And one of the things that we have learned from development over the years here in North Logan is, go to the map here, is that even if you meet the parking regulations, you're still going to have parking problems. And I think everybody here has seen that has been an issue. And one of the primary culprits is just across the street to the south. The Cove, when it was developed, it had 2 garage spaces in the garage. It had plenty of parking along their center promenade to meet the city's code. And yet we still see cars parked out on the street. And as we looked at this carefully after it had been in place for a few years, what we realized is that the garages were only 400 square feet. And while you might be able to market that as a two-car garage for Priuses and smart cars, it does not actually represent the true nature of our community and their parking needs. As you look at single-family homes, traditionally you'll see a garage that's somewhere between 500 and 600, somewhere upwards of 650 square feet for a traditional single-family two-car garage, where you can fit an F-150, you can fit some shelving, you can fit a toolbox and some other storage items. And that's something I think that the city needs to understand is what does the internal parking look like on some of these attached housing units? Is it actually adequate, or is it going to end up turning into a storage space with maybe one vehicle parked in there, or perhaps no vehicles are parked in there and we're clogging up all of the guest parking? So that's something to be aware of, something I think that we need to request some clarification on from the applicant. Okay, I'll hop back over here real quick. Open space. In this particular project, there's a central green. It's a proposed neighborhood park. It would be managed by an HOA. And this is something I think that is well-intentioned. It's centrally located for easy access from all of the participants or all the residents to participate in a neighborhood gathering space. But one of the things I think that is important to understand is what is it, how usable is the space? And I want to hop over and show this. I'm going to scroll down here. Okay, let me zoom in. Okay, this is part of the site planning exercise that we have gone through, the developer has gone through. One thing that we saw that was potentially problematic and I think needs some consideration is the central green is also doubling as a detention facility, which we would expect and is anticipated. But when you look at the contours and understanding that there's going to be a depression and a swell, the usable open space is quite a bit less in the flat area below. And I think it's important that these residents have a space where you could hop out and maybe throw a baseball or a frisbee or a football. And you're competing with all of these other residents for some space. And I feel like the usable space here is a little bit shy. So that's something to keep in mind. And while we're on this exhibit, something also that has been looked into is snow storage. Snow storage has been an issue with some of our townhome projects over the years because the snow inevitably uses up guest parking spaces, which then exacerbates our parking issues in the winter. And I think that the applicant has done a pretty good job of trying to find good storage spaces where you can actually push snow in a linear direction and push it to a storage area. You'll see that those blue areas are snow storage. The intention there is snow storage. Okay, let's hop back over to the report. So something to be aware of on that. The other high-level item that we like to look at with any rezone request, especially one of this scale, is does the city even have the water and sewer capacity to service a project like this? And what we look at is the number of units, the anticipated number of gallons per day. We put it into our water model, our sewer model. We look at our water and sewer master plans, and we look to see if there's any critical shortages or potential shortages. And what we found was that the wastewater master plan does call for an 8-inch sewer line to be connected in 2200 North between 4th and 6th East. And that would be a system improvement that would be needed if this were to move forward. And then also, very similar, the culinary master plan calls for an 8-inch water line to also be connected along that frontage. There's also a pressure reducing valve that is necessary in that water line, which is not a small piece of infrastructure. So we need to be aware of that. The developer needs to be aware of that, and those will be necessary for us to be able to service this project. Now, development pays its own way, so presumably most of this expense would be on them to satisfy those needs. Okay. We've already talked about the general plan, where it is located in our future land use map. Again, the goals and the visioning for the city center anticipates multi-story, mixed-use, walkable, attached housing product, retail, service, shops, those types of development patterns. Okay, transportation master plan. Again, 2200 North, 4th East. Those are master plan roads, 66 feet in width. There will be some frontage improvements that are required on both frontages of 2200 and 4th East. So curb gutter, sidewalk, asphalt to complete those road rights of way. Parks and trails, there are no parks anticipated. Again, there is an HOA park that is proposed in the center of this area. But again, there's no parks and trails that are anticipated as city-owned pieces of infrastructure. Okay. Staff recommendation on zoning changes. Staff, we don't necessarily get into the weeds on whether we will give a positive or negative recommendation. We present the facts. This is what is being proposed by the applicant. We do propose some conditions if the Planning Commission were to consider moving forward in any degree with this. And the list of conditions that we've put together, and again, this is just an initial recommendation from staff for some conditions we can add, remove, or modify as necessary. But number one, the applicant shall provide minimum architectural renderings for the yard homes to be incorporated into the master development plan. We saw the renderings for the commercial and the row homes. We'd like to see what the yard homes look like. The applicant shall provide additional variation in colors and architectural elements to be added to the master development plan for the general and row buildings. I think what the applicant has proposed are very aesthetically pleasing buildings, but with the number of them, it's going to get pretty repetitious, and I think we need a little bit more variation to break that up a little bit. We want to see the side and rear architectural details for the buildings. We saw the front facades, but I think it's important we see, all the way around those buildings. A traffic report needs to be reviewed by the DRC. We did receive that earlier this week, but we do need to review it from a technical perspective before we bring that back to Planning Commission. And any necessary improvements, whether they're on-site or off-site, need to be incorporated into a development agreement, so the developer is responsible for some of those improvements if they are found to be necessary. Parking counts need to be verified in the summary tables. We need to verify how many parking spaces there are and then determine if it's sufficient. That's, I think, an important discussion that we need to have. The number of row buildings and townhomes needs to be reduced in order to provide a truly usable and meaningful central park space. Again, that's a discretionary thing that we need to talk through. Finalization of owner occupancy mechanism needs to be incorporated into a development agreement for the project. Something we haven't talked about yet, but is important to understand. When we went through the general plan and the city center master plan, the public overwhelmingly wanted to see a high degree of owner occupancy in our denser areas of town. It was important to get residents who are invested in our community, that had a longer standing tenure with the city, and to be a little bit less transient, to provide first-time home buyer opportunities for some of our residents. And so that is a requirement in the city center code. And in order to achieve owner occupancy, the city's been working on a mechanism to impose a deed restriction on any of these dwelling units, which would require for an owner to occupy the property for at least 2 years before they are eligible to rent it as a rental property. But if they were to sell that unit, that deed restriction would roll back on, and the next owner would have that same owner occupancy requirement into perpetuity. So there are a few details that we are working on with enforcement and the mechanism in particular, but that is something that is expected to be applied to any of these city center developments as they come through the pipeline. And as a recommendation, you'll see that we would like to finalize that with the city council and apply that to any project, including this one if it were to move forward. And then lastly, the project needs to construct the commercial building simultaneously and in direct proportionality with the residential elements of the project. We don't want to see, if this or a variation of this were to be approved, we don't want to see all the residential come to fruition with none of the commercial. We want to see it very balanced and simultaneously developed. So those are the recommendations as we've initially identified. Again, because this is a legislative item, the Planning Commission and the City Council have broad deference in your decision making. And we can add, adjust to these conditions as you may see fit. We do have our applicant here with us tonight to answer any questions that we may have. And we've also received several public comments via email this week, and those have all been provided to the Planning Commission and the City Council ahead of this meeting for their consideration. Because again, this is legislative, we have noticed this for a public hearing, so we want to make sure that we open the public hearing and also give the applicant a moment to discuss and to address some of these items.
Yeah, thanks, Scott, for going through the staff report and for the details of the history as well. Does the applicant wish to address the Planning Commission? Yeah, come on up. Let us know who you are. And
Hi, my name is Jake Thompson. And yes, there's a need. I'm from North Logan, by the way. And so I don't see anybody I recognize quite yet, but there is a need for housing, I think, regardless of, of what, the area to find these places are getting harder and harder to find, unfortunately. And so talking to Scott, I think it's been a couple of years now discussing, North Logan, the availability of, where we can put housing that there's such a need for. And this area was brought up. And so we've been working. This hasn't been just a split decision on what to do here. This has been something that's been discussed for quite some time now. So there is some concerns, and I understand these as far as what Scott said, going through these line items here. I think the parking, that's something that we're going to look into. Obviously, that's something that we need to really address, especially in this area. And I think I'm completely open into discussing that, what needs to be done there. But I think more so that the need and going through the art of making this a usable space for commercial and meeting the needs of the city and making this a beautiful project ultimately for the city. Again, like I said, where I'm from here, there is some pride of making a good project here. So that's the ultimate goal of what we're trying to do here, and ultimately what you guys have discussed over multiple years now, what to do with this particular area. I feel like we have a good project that will be successful here and meet the needs of the city and our children ultimately. So again, if you have any questions, let me know.
all right, thank you. I appreciate it. Did anyone from the commission have questions for Scott at all, clarifying before we open the public hearing?
I'm curious, Scott. So this is a zoning map amendment or a rezone. What if the rezone, just trying to figure out what happens next. So if the rezone itself were to get approved, what is being approved with that? Is the project being approved? Is the development agreement, like the master plan or the development plan, does that come later? And does that come back for public hearing? Like, what are the next steps if a rezone were to get approved today?
Yeah, great question. Whenever we have a rezone application submitted to the city, we like to say, well, why? Why do you want the zone change, and what is it you're asking for? We understand you want this zone, and we know what the zone will allow, but what is your proposal? What is the intent? And so for that reason, with our, specifically in the city center, we ask for what's called a master development plan to communicate to the city what it is we expect to see. With this project, we would likely want to, with any approval, if an approval is to be granted, a development agreement that specifically memorializes this intent. And so we, before we were to approve anything, we would want to massage this master development plan until we're comfortable with it. And we would then attach it as an exhibit to a development agreement where it would indicate that if it doesn't go forward as it was proposed, the city would have the right to rezone it back to its previous classification. Now, that being said, as we get further into the engineering details and the technicalities, inevitably there will be some adjustments and some pushing and pulling to get things to fit once we get into the technical details. And it's understood that there may be some minor variation in a master development plan, but if we run into something down the road and then we need to amend that, we would need to come through this legislative process again to amend the master development plan. Or if we run into something and a developer says, I can't do that, I'm not going to do that, we would say, okay, then we're going to exercise our right to revert the zoning back. This project isn't going to fit the space like we had thought. So with any development agreement, we would have that provision that would protect the city to what we had been shown in the master development plan. But yeah, we wouldn't want to have an understanding this is exactly what is going to be done, but pretty dang close.
So whatever master development plan is included with this rezone, we're not necessarily approving that, but it does start to set a precedence
It
for
would.
what may be
Yeah.
built there.
It would be attached to the development agreement. And so at that point, there is some vested right on the developer's part, once the zone is granted, that they can proceed with the understanding that if they develop something that is substantially similar, then they would be able to proceed. But it would need to be understood that there are some minor changes here and there that could occur down the line.
So after a rezone like this, there still would be a subdivision approval that would need to happen.
Correct.
I assume the master development plan would be looked at that point as well.
Mhm.
And with a project like this, when we get to subdivision, now things are getting a lot more serious.
Correct.
But again, whatever we look at today is starting to set a precedence for the way that goes.
Yeah, we just keep getting more granular. And if we keep, as we go down that review and that technical, review process, we will always look back to the master development plan and say, are we still consistent? And if we identify that we are not, then we would say we can't approve this next, building permit, or we can't approve the subdivision because it doesn't align with, what was proposed. And we would have to go back a step and retool it through a legislative process like we would be doing here today.
Great. Yeah.
I just have a comment about the traffic impact analysis, and I haven't seen it yet, but from what I understand, it was done in the last few weeks. And my concern about that is I would like to see it somehow, whoever's smart enough to do this, to realize that this was done at a time when school is not in session. And with school in session, that to me is going to change the analysis a little bit. So like I said, I don't know the people who do these analysis if they can provide that kind of information, but that was my concern because I live in this area and at school time, it is different than it is in the summer.
Any other clarifying questions for Scott?
Scott, is the FLUP for the Eastern Transition, does that include this mixed use that you showed me too? That's anticipated in there, right?
Yeah, and to clarify, Jake has worked with the city through. He's been kind of watching as the city's gone through the general plan, city center master plan. He has studied the code to say, if I propose this, is it in alignment? And he's done a really good job of working with staff to understand what the code requires and to put together a project that by and large does match the vision of that general plan. Now, it should be also understood, we've seen a lot of proposals on this property that are not even close, not even in the solar sphere. We see projects where you'll have a developer, a national developer, look at a project and they'll see how many units they can cram on a piece of property without any thought to the livability, the quality of life of those residents in the future. And so it should be known we've passed on many. We've kind of shoot them out the door before they even had a chance to propose anything. Jake has taken the right approach of engaging with the city early, often, and finding a way to fit what the vision had been as we went through, this master plan.
As part of the deed restriction that you're talking about, I mean, I'm not an attorney. Is that like in exchange for the rezone?
That is a base requirement. That was a vision and a goal and a policy that was established as the general plan was developed. When we first started the general plan, we had a tremendous amount of pressure from the state to build housing. And if anybody has been following the legislature the last several years, there's been endless mandates from the state on local municipalities to upzone, increase supply, and build. We, as it stands today, if the city does not have it's called a moderate income housing plan that we are found compliant with on a yearly basis, the state charges us a penalty every year. And it is substantial what that penalty would equate to from the taxpayer perspective. So we went through a moderate income housing plan prior to the general plan. We said, look, we will identify parcels where we believe it to be most applicable, what's the word I'm looking for? In the core where we anticipate services, transit, those types of things. And we said, we'll find some areas where maybe we can participate in some zone changes, but that was previous to the general plan. And so as we started the general plan, we asked the public, knowing that there's this pressure and the state is forcing the cities to do something, where do we want to do this? What does it look like? And do we prefer, different housing product types over others? And we asked in a survey, we said, if you had your choice of more attainable housing product types, all the way from single family, small lot single family, all the way down to a trailer park, what is your preference? And of course, we found the preference. And then we asked, would it change your mind if owner occupancy was a requirement? Would you feel more comfortable? And overwhelming, the public said, yes, absolutely. We want to see owner occupancy, even if we have to go to a smaller housing product type. And so the goal was, look, we don't want to see just apartments, a sea of apartments everywhere. We don't want our generation, our young generation, just toiling away to pay rent. We want to find owner-occupied options for them, even if it's a smaller housing product type. So stacked flat condos and townhomes were what the public said. If we're going to go small, those are our preferences of smaller housing product types, but we want to find a way to make them owner-occupied. And so that was the trade-off to say, look, if we're going to have our hands tied by the state to have higher density, then we're going to push for owner occupancy. And for the city center specifically, if any of these projects are considered, it has that requirement that they deed restrict those units for owner occupancy. That way we don't have national interest buying up a bunch of these units and converting them into rentals. We keep them with local ownership. We give our next generation an opportunity to buy into the American dream, and that's why the goal was established as it was. So, to your question there, it is required. It is something that if the developer were to push back and say I don't want to do that, we would just flat out say we would recommend denial. But they've entertained this. They've said, hey, this is challenging. Nobody else in the valley, in Cache Valley, and mostly in the state, they're not requiring a deed restriction for owner occupancy. So we are leading the way in that regard. And Jake has said, look, I'm concerned about this. I'm the only one, and I'm the only fish in the sea who is taking upon myself this burden. But it is something we're working through. So we're excited to see some housing product have owner occupancy.
I have a question about the city center master plan map.
Yeah.
It looks like about a third of that lot would be single family detached, and then the rest would be mixed use. And this is definitely not, that little row of yard buildings does not meet that. Is that strict on zone, or that's just the general guideline?
Great question. Yeah, great question. This exhibit that you're seeing here, this was early on in the city center master planning process. We had multiple workshops, and we sat around a table and we scribbled on maps to try to understand, where do we do single family buffer, where do we do mixed use. And the idea as we were doing this was, let's do a buffer, but we do think that there's a need for mixed use medical office close to the medical facilities that are there. And that was the kind of the layout of land use. This is more land use specific, single family, then mixed use. But then as we got even more granular into the form-based code, the actual codified code, the east side transition became much more specific, that any development along the canal, and that's for this parcel here and any of these parcels that are vacant further to the south, that there would be a requirement for a single tier of single family homes along those canals. So that's why you see the proposal as it is depicted today.
Thanks.
Any other questions from the commission? All right. We're going to open up the public hearing. Before we get started, I have a few instructions here. Before you begin, please state your name for the record. Speak into the microphone so your comments can be recorded. Please limit your statements to 3 minutes. You are not allowed to combine or bank minutes to speak on behalf of others. Please phrase your opinions in the form of statements, not questions. A public hearing is your opportunity to express your opinions to the Planning Commission. Not a time to ask questions of or to expect dialogue between yourself and the Planning Commission or city staff. Please address your comments to the Planning Commission, not to the public. The Commission might ask questions about your comments in order for them to better understand you. In the future, note that if you have questions or need to discuss an issue, you may meet with the Planning Commission members or the appropriate staff city staff member before the public hearing where dialogue can take place. You may provide a written statement as your input for a hearing. You may read your entire statement or summarize it. The 3-minute limit still applies. You may provide a copy of a written statement to the city recorder. He will make copies for the Planning Commission, and the written statement will become part of the public record. However, the written submitted statement will not be included in the minutes of the meeting. All right, we'll now open the public hearing. If you'll come up one at a time, and we'll give time to anybody who wishes to speak.
I'll put up 3 when there's 30 seconds left.
Hi, my name is Tim Tolbert, and I did submit some opposition package information to the city already for this project because I believe it's legally inconsistent and technically incomplete. Over the last 2 years, the city initiated a rewrite of the master plan, the general plan, and overhaul of the municipal code. I do not believe that process genuinely considered the feedback and welfare of the common resident. Now, these large development projects are dropping, and very few protections exist for residents that made it actually into the final master plan. I want to talk about 2 that are being directly threatened by this project: thoughtful consideration of site orientation and view sheds, and zoning equity. First, the city master plan, page 39, requires thoughtful consideration of site orientation and view sheds to ensure an optimal skyline for residents. Yet your own staff report, page 10, confirms the developer provided no rear facade details and no renderings for the 8 buffer buildings that will be jammed next to my home. This commission can't protect my mountain vistas when the developer is hiding the very data required to evaluate them. When I'm in my backyard working in my orchard, I can't see the mountains. All I see is 5-story buildings. Second, let's discuss equity. General Plan Goal 108B commits the city to preserving property values. Yet you are considering handing my neighbor a commercial windfall of 14 units per acre while trapping my property in RE1 zoning, just to provide a farmy feel for his new tenants. This is the definition of unconstitutional spot zoning, especially since my land is already designated in that RC2 area on the future land use map. Furthermore, the application they made is a mess. The traffic study is unfinished, the parking math is broken, and the Central Park is actually a stormwater basin. This lack of data and broken math is, if this lack of data and broken math is a new standard, then I submit that my 1.37 acres right next door should also be rezoned to MXCC. Tonight, I have provided exactly as much architectural detail for my request as the developer provided for the buffer homes, which is 0. I recommend that we table this project until a full view shed analysis is conducted and other deficiencies are corrected. Otherwise, treat us with equity and include my land in the rezone. Oh, and please actually listen to the input of the citizens and residents this time around.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. My name is Stephen Moore. I'm a resident of North Logan. Appreciate your service, and I did submit an email. I assume you received that. Great, thank you very much. I just want to summarize a couple of points. I studied landscape architecture. I have a degree in landscape architecture, and I appreciate the fact that the form-based code says that the east side transition provides a sensitive transition in scale, massing, with building forms and circulation patterns that respect the surrounding residential character. When I look at this plan and compare it against the villa, against the Cove, even against Four Seasons, it is not sensitive. As soon as we look east to go to R1, it's definitely not sensitive. It is not a transition. And I think that's the number one issue here that needs to be addressed, is what does a transition look like? Putting in a 3-story townhomes is huge. Those are much bigger than the Cove, bigger than the villas. And that would be just not in character with not only that area, but North Logan. Show me where in North Logan we've got 3-story townhomes. I guess we do down at Four Seasons. But that's West Side transition. A little bit different situation. Again, I think the key point is that we don't have good transition. And secondly, the number of units per acre. To the south, the Cove would be MR7, 7 units per acre. And further south would be single family 6, and that's that whole transition zone. So I'm thinking that it makes sense to keep that in the 6 to 7 range for this particular property within their parcel within that transition zone. Now to the west, we got the town center villas, and that's putting there's 6.7 units per acre on that property, and that's a delightful community. I really like that community. Four Seasons, it's about 9 units per acre. This development is talking about 20 units per acre.
20 seconds.
So I'm disappointed, to be honest, that it's gone this far. I don't understand why our city planners don't understand our feelings as citizens and really respect what's already been laid out in providing a good, solid, sensitive transition plan.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Susan Coles, and I'm a resident of North Logan. While my comments are not as well researched and thought out as the previous two, I do think that to start we're starting our whole city center and transition, to start with a zoning change that changes what we spent all this time making a plan on is like the adage or whatever of boiling a frog by starting it in cold water. And I think by starting with the zoning change with those large of differences to what we planned is the same as boiling a frog by starting it in cold water. And I hope that the Planning and Zoning Commission gives this serious consideration. And if it should move forward, I seriously hope that the City Council also sees the wisdom in seeing something different, this is not what was planned and presented to the residents of North Logan. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
My name is Bill Talbert. I'm a resident of North Logan as well, and I have a master's degree in architectural engineering and master planning. Been doing it for a lot of years, and I would second what the one individual spoke about for transitioning, because the idea that you go from the community that we have there to a community with, and you talked about architectural styles, and you had one picture that showed a 5-story apartment complex. Not 3, but 5. A couple of the really grand ones were 3-story. But you can't just build a big block like that in those neighborhoods without negatively impacting traffic, schools, and everything else that's there. So I'm concerned about that. First, to you and your staff, you did a great job of researching and working the details of snow storage and parking and recreation and everything in that one block diagram that you had, but you ignored a discussion of that other part of the transition zone north of 2200, which is mixed use, which unless you know what that's going to be before you approve that project and that rezoning, you may be in for some ugly surprises. Tim talked about the views that he has on his property on the east side of the canal versus what he's going to see on the west side. And I heard somebody in last night's city council meeting stating that there would be 5-story apartment buildings in that area. That was during last night's meeting, and the idea that you go out from nothing and you've got 5 stories is pretty breathtaking in the negative way. Also, if you're talking about owner occupancies, if you start to get it into that really dense residential under mixed use or even bigger office complexes, you're going to multiply the parking problems and the other things that are there, and you're not going to see owner occupancy in that kind of huge buildings, even if you separate them by 8 feet and build 4 or 5 of them. It's going to really make owner occupancy, which is important consideration, a net giant question mark. So congratulations on the part you covered. I would have liked to have seen more on that green zone at the north end and north of 2200. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Bill Hartman. I live in the Villas. I'm retired. I just like North Logan. We like the people here. We like the way it looks. I was very disappointed when the Three Peaks was supposed to be no more than 2-story, became 3-story. And then there's no parking, and they're parking on the side of the street in the mud, and they thought North Logan would maybe pave that or do something. So we got a real parking problem, and I think I got pretty good reflexes and everything, but I find myself going out on 2200 rather than on 4th Street because you can't see both ways and there's going to be some bad accidents. Now, I like the idea that it's going to be developed, maybe half as many houses and smaller houses, not these skyscrapers. I don't understand what you're trying to turn North Logan into, but I think once it starts, it's kind of the dike, so we got all these other cars that are going to be coming out onto 2200 and 4th. You got a problem right now with what we already got. Maybe we need to make 2200 4 lanes and make 4th Street 4 lanes because we're going to add a lot of more traffic. And I'm glad you're looking at that, but I like what Teresa said, that she's saying, we need to look at this a couple more times when you get the school kids and other things happening, because once we start down this road, we might have a difficult time going back.
Thank you.
I'm Quinn Young. I live just up the street on 2200 North. I appreciate the amount of work. I spent some time looking through the master plan and the documents that the city provided, and appreciate the amount of work that went into that and the job that you all have in trying to balance the various needs. I also appreciate learning that the developer is local and is trying to be responsive to our needs. And I just wanted to express 3 concerns I have that everybody's been expressing, right? It's parking, the amount of green space that's planned, and the transition. I think that there is a place for these kind of developments in the city center, and I appreciate the plan and see value in that. I'm just really concerned with what it does to that neighborhood, the neighborhood I live in, and what the implications would be for that.
Thank you.
My name is Christine Tolbert, and I'm a resident of North Logan, and I love this community. And I think the charm of it, of just having open space and that one of the things that we voted on a year and a half or so ago about open space and protecting that, having the city be more in control of developers coming in and taking advantage of farmers and whatever, that have land. I thought that was, I voted for that, but I see that now it's kind of a point where now the city's taking over those things. And I appreciate the work and all that has gone into all that. I would like to see a center that would be more conducive to something with views, open space, and maybe on a smaller scale as far as height, so it doesn't consume a lot of just so it doesn't overwhelm the valley. When you come in here, I don't know what was pictured in mind, but this seems like something so grand and beyond this type of community to me. And I just want to express that. And thank you again for your help and all you do.
Thank you.
I'm Yvonne Norman. I'm a resident of North Logan. I pretty much share all of the concerns that have been voiced thus far. My biggest concern is there's just not enough open spaces, big parks for children to play, especially when the plans for housing are becoming smaller and smaller. Children need places to play, to run around safely. And if there's apartments, they don't have that there. So I would love to see big open parks, maybe some smaller cottage homes so that we can meet those needs of having homes that are more affordable, but really put an emphasis on making sure we continue to have open spaces. Because once we build on this land, those chances for open spaces are forever gone. So I just think it's so important to preserve that while we have the opportunity. And the other thing I'm concerned about is this 2-year owner occupancy. I don't know if that's is that the state rule for owner occupancy? It only has to be 2 years? Because I don't see that that's any big deal. Anybody can go in and just buy something for, live there for 2 years and sell it, and then you'll still have these outside investors coming 2-3 years later and buying those up, and then they charge a lot for rent. So I don't see that we're providing people with affordable housing when the price of rent in these places is pretty much the same price as so many people's mortgage payments. That's all. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Good evening. My name's Eric Hansen. I live on 600 East, so directly east of the property in question. I've already sent an email, so you've got that information from me. I don't need to rehash that. Other than, yeah, I think my biggest concern is the transition. The thing I guess that I would just caution or request consideration of is just the reminder that if a rezone is granted, once that is done, whatever the developer comes back with, if it meets the requirements of that zoning, there's really nothing you can do about it at that point, right? So the leverage point or where things are made, I think, is in the change of the zoning. It's concerning to me that there's still some information, traffic study, and some other things that haven't been presented yet. And it seems like without a full picture, that's it's a little bit concerning trying to make a decision without all that information. So we request that you consider that as you make your decision and deliberate on what to do. I appreciate Scott bringing all that information and giving us some good context. So thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Russell Goodwin. I'm also a resident of North Logan. Did not intend to speak, but noting some of the comments, as a fairly regular attendee at our council meetings and the planning commission, the, the city has endeavored to complete a canal bank trail along the twin ditches here from Greenville to 2200 North. And I believe that was put in effect briefly, perhaps through COVID. And the city, I'm not sure what the hangup is or what the problem is. The city has been pursuing making that trail easement or that trail availability permanent and in law. And I'm not sure why that hasn't been part of the discussion with the developer and our planner, but if the city was to move ahead with that Canal Bank Trail, these residents of this proposed development could get down to Greenville School Park. And maybe you could encourage the school district to purchase the property on the east side of Greenville and protect that. Anyway, that thought occurred to me as some of the people were commenting.
Thank you.
My name is Kaylee Young, and I live on 2200 North, just up from this proposed this thing. And I wanted to make a couple comments. One is, when I first saw the plan, I was shocked by the number of units. It was a significant amount. And where I live, I'm affected by that corridor between 6th and 4th. And when we first moved here, we got to get it if we had someone on the street. And I have to deal with the people that park on both sides of the street for the those townhomes there. It's a terrible situation in my mind. And then we got the medical building, and we have even worse. And so when I see that there are 150 whatever parking spaces, and knowing that people have at least 2 cars and sometimes more than that, I don't know how we're going to add all that with what we currently have, what impact that's going to have. And if you don't live near it or go by it, you're not going to worry about it. So I just want to make you aware that that is a problem in my mind. And I see children riding their bikes trying to go around cars, and the cars open the door. I think it's a very big concern for safety. I will say I did think those buildings looked very nice when they showed the picture. I'm not saying that I want all those buildings there, but I think they did a good job trying to make it a beautiful place. But I think if you consider all those things, that you'll make a good decision for our community. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay.
My name's Tim Stewart. My family has owned the property on 587 East 2200 North, which is immediately across the canal. We've owned that property for 50 years. We've seen the results of many good decisions and not so good decisions the Planning Commission makes. But North Logan is a great place to live. And I understand that this is part of the inevitable redevelopment plan, okay, rezoning plan. But we only have one shot at this, and it needs to be done right, and it needs to be done well. And I think the question you have in front of you is what in front of you is it done right, and is it done well? Part of the problem is that you have a city center master plan, and you're about to lock in a fairly sizable parcel that will be part of that city center plan for the next 50 years. And the question is if you're not happy with the master plan itself right now that the developer has put on the table, then if you make a decision tonight, you essentially are locking in something you're not happy with. The staff has recommended. Staff's done a great job, and they have 8 outstanding recommendations that are not yet complete, and that's not counting the another 6 or 7 or 8 that you've heard tonight. And so the question is this the time to actually take action, or do you wait a little bit, address these concerns, and bring us all back when we are able to have an additional conversation? Again, we have one shot to get this right. 33%. 33% is the owner occupancy rate in the Cove across the street. Do you want the rest of the city center to be rentals or single family homes or sorry, multifamily homes that are rentals, or do you want it to look like something that will actually reflect a real city center? And so that's what I put forward to you right now is I don't think the current plan follows the vision that is listed in the city plan. And there are a few simple fixes that you could look at, but they won't be reflected tonight. So we've heard concerns about the transition from the canal to 4th East. A simple fix would be, well, you take the green space and you move it next to the canal, slide the single family homes down one slot and adjust accordingly. But that's not going to be reflected tonight if you go forward. But if you go forward, you lock the developer and you lock the city into something that's actually deeply flawed, I think. And so I'd hope you'd keep that in mind. I think we're happy to work with you and work with the developer because we want North Logan to look great. But I would encourage you, the simple fix right now is to probably table things until we get at least until the staff completes their recommendations. Again, love North Logan. That's why we live here. And again, happy to work with you. We know you have a hard job, and we'll continue to bless you in your efforts. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Brian Cox, and I just live next to most of the people that spoke here, so just right up the street. And again, I just want to say thanks too, because you guys have a hard job. I've never done what you do, but I know some of you, and just be grateful for you. And just maybe some of the same concerns. Probably Tim said what I would want to say too is we know that development's going to happen. We know that something needs to happen there. But is this the best option? And I did hear that, there's been other options, and I appreciate that, they didn't even make it this far because I really appreciate you checking out and working things. But, the things that probably concern us is those that live right next by is, again, I was part of, or participated in the planning up to this point. We've lived in North Logan for 33 years, so we've been a part of all that. When I was seeing those plans before that transition, it looked like a third. I think you brought that up. So this doesn't feel like what I thought I was agreeing to, when we were looking at it. And again, I understand things change, but that doesn't seem like a transition. Also, the 3 stories is concerning because when you're near Main Street, you expect them to be a little taller. And then as you get away from Main Street, you expect things to get more residential. The feel is going to be, you're going to drive up 2200 and you see the 3-story, and then you're going to get lower, and then all of a sudden you're going to see what looks like skyscrapers compared to everything else that's around. So I think the height is very concerning to me. That's not a transition. We actually transitioned high to low, and then we're going back to high, and then back to single housing. It's, I live right there. That's doesn't feel like a good transition. So again, there's things that could be done to fix that. The parking's been mentioned. That's very concerning. I drive up 2200 all the time to get to my house, and those cars are smashed in there. When school's in, we're backed clear up to the corner to that roundabout. There are cars and mothers waiting to drop their kids off. That backs up that long sometimes. So there's a real issue with traffic today with 150 more units kind of trying to come in and out of there and everything. I don't know how that's going to work. So I think that needs to really be understood, and the traffic considered when school's in, not during the summer. And the owner occupancy requirement, I'm probably question too, how do you make that stick? That seems like, I don't know, not an expert, but it's a little concerning. I would love to see more people owning and staying here because it's our neighbors, it's our community, it's our members of our church and everything. We love to have families that stick around for a little bit. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Sheree Israelson, and again, we're grateful for you. You have a hard job. We're grateful that you're willing to take it on. I'm a school teacher. My biggest concern is we have a school right there, and kids walk by there every day. 150 units translated into school kids. Our school's not big enough. We're going to need a new school. We're going to need new taxpayers. If they're not going to stay there, if it's rental units, they're not paying property tax. My concern is, how are we going to project in the future? What are we going to do to build our community and allow kids to go to school where there are not 40 kids in a classroom with one teacher? I also am concerned with the traffic. I'm concerned with the parking. I see kids crossing the street in front of cars because their parents allow them to. And if there's going to be more congestion, that's going to even be worse. I am not opposed to change, but I do think that we're going too fast, too dense, without, maybe taking some time to think it over. So again, thank you, and I appreciate you taking this into consideration.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Olga Tolbert, and I just want to make a statement saying that we have a lot of areas closer to Main Street with a lot of open land that are more appropriate for a more dense development than this particular 12-acre or 9-acre zone. And I just wanted to address that. Thanks.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak before I close?
My name is Jake Gunther. I've lived here in North Logan for 26 years. And like other people have said, there seems to be a problem with parking. That's one of my big concerns with this project. And I guess the thing I would like to just state is maybe it's time for us to change the way we calculate parking, change the way we go about that. If because the current way we do the calculation led to the Cove and the Three Peaks Medical Building, and parking is just not working there. In addition to maybe having 2 cars per household, if you'll drive up and down 2200 North, there's trailers parked out on the street. So it's not just cars. There's other things that people own and need to have a place for. So I would like to just leave it at that and just mention that I have a big concern about parking. Thanks.
Yep, thank you.
My name's Rex Probst. I live just off of 2200 North. We've been here about 40 years. When the original city center plan and things went in, 4th East was pretty much the division line where the multiple use was going to be west, and 4th East was going to be that division line. I personally would like to see it kept that way. In the material that I read, it says that the zoning there is RE or R112, but even from the maps that was included, immediately across the canal is RE1. And I don't see how changing the zoning is going to be fair to those people that have to have an acre and have conformed to that, to having such dense population next to them. Yeah, 1 row of houses is some protection, but is it enough? As the parking has been mentioned, I won't talk about parking, but the other thing that I've seen living here for a long time, snow removal is terrible. The Cove has absolutely no place to push snow. And if we compound that by putting that many units in there, where's the snow going to go? How are they going to take care of the snow removal? We're just making too many issues with transportation and movement. And last year wasn't bad, but when we have a bad snow year, I've been told that they're not supposed to push snow across 2200 from the Cove, and that's happened every year since it's been there. And so I think snow removal is another big thing that we have to look at to take care of. And I, for one, would like to see all the multiple use, the high density kept on the west side of 4th East.
Thank you. Anyone else would like to speak? All right, I will close the public hearing. Thank you to all those who've come tonight to the meeting and to share your opinions and thoughts on this. Yeah, for taking the time to have the best interest of the town in heart. All right, now back to the Planning Commission. Any discussion, questions?
This isn't a fun night for me to be on the Planning and Zoning Commission. I look out there and I see a lot of neighbors and who I consider good friends. I will say that since being on the commission, I spent for a while, over a year, a lot of hours determining city center, determining all this, listened to lots of comment, went to open houses where people put up. This was a lot of time and a lot of effort. And this proposal, which I'm not saying there's not, I have a few concerns, but it comes closer to what I believe the Planning Commission and the City Council had in mind when we went through this huge process. Like I said, those of you who come to these meetings know I'm the parking person that's always bringing up, I always bring up the parking thing because I live where there's a big problem. So anyway, I would like to see that worked on a little bit more. I tell people all the time, I said, I really like North Logan. I think we should speak highly of to say that we're the first to really get into the owner occupied. I'm really impressed that we do that. It's not happening anywhere. And if a developer is willing to take that on, I really give it to them because that's a real benefit for us if we can come up with the mechanism to actually have the owner occupied. So I appreciate the fact that the developers were willing to take a chance and work on that because I believe that is what makes communities better. I do believe it's owner occupied. I have a big concern about the amount of open space. I agree with a lot of you that said that could be bigger, and I would just like to be able to work with the developer to satisfy some of these concerns that I have.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, so I have some personal impact from this because I live on 2130 North. So, and my kids ride their bikes to Greenville down 400. So right now they have to cross 400 and then 2200 again, and then a bunch of streets. So having sidewalk on that side would be great. And at the same time, I can hear my wife in the back of my mind saying, "What about all the cars?" So I know. Anyway, personal impact there. So it's something I'm interested in getting right. I like to zoom out when we look at these. And like you said, we spent a lot of time looking at the general plan, talking about the city center. And I've been in some of those conversations of proposals that have come along for this area, this parcel in particular. And I do think that this, in my opinion, is the best one we've seen so far. And when I look at, I know there's a lot of concern about the use and the density. And I feel like this is a very important, like comments have been made tonight. This is a very important one to get right because it's such an interesting and unique location in terms of transition from the city center to the surrounding neighborhoods. When I look at it though, I mean, you've got to the north, you've got commercial, to the west, you've got commercial. So we've got some commercial element to this as well that ties that in. You've got townhomes to the south, so you've got townhomes that kind of tie this in. And then you've got the homes to the east. And so we've got some buffer there as well. So the intent and the vision of this plan is as good as anything we've seen. I think it fits the general plan. I think it fits the city center master plan. I think it fits the transition. I agree there's some issues with the plan in general. And we need to work through some of that. So in terms of the rezone itself, I'm not opposed to that. I think that this is a really good option for this parcel. I want to see, knowing that the development plan is going to set some precedents for what goes in the future. I do want to see some work on that. Scott, I wanted to ask you a couple questions to address some of the public comments. So parking has been mentioned, particularly through Peaks and the Cove. We know we've had parking issues there, and the city has a black eye when it comes to those two spots. So have we changed our parking calculations since then? Have we learned our lesson and tried to apply that going forward, or where are we at with?
Yeah, we have. This was several years ago when obviously the Three Peaks went in, and when that issue arose, we took a hard look at it. It actually predates my time with the city, but I do know that there was a discussion and a hard look at that calculation. And what we found with the Three Peaks Medical was unique. Normally, with a doctor's office or a medical plaza, you have patients that come for maybe a checkup every 6 months, or an appointment here and there. The tendency inside of that building is high frequency. The allergy clinic, I know by personal experience, I went there twice a week for 3 years in a row to get allergy shots. Like, it's high frequency. There's a lot of people that go there on a regular basis. You've got a pediatric office, you've got the ENT office, you've got a pharmacy, and you've got
orthodontist.
the orthodontist. Yeah, my kids go every other week or so to the orthodontist. So that is a unique characteristic that I don't think any parking code or calculation could have ever caught. And it was a learning exercise, but if we were to have like primary care physicians in that building, we would have a whole lot less parking. So that was something we learned from for sure. Parking is tricky because even if, for example, we build a building with the understanding that it's going to be a medical office, maybe that medical office in 10 years, somebody moves out, closes their practice, and some other use occupies that space, and the parking can ebb and flow, over the decades. So it's tricky. We do not want to exacerbate the issue that is there today. So we do want to take a really close look at the parking. Something that is hard to stomach is, this is the city center. On-street parking is somewhat expected. We don't want to rely on on-street parking by any means, especially in the winter. So we're not saying we're planning for on-street parking. So don't mix my words here. But it is going to be a denser core by nature, by design. A downtown walkable city center is going to have some on-street parking. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean it needs to spill into the neighborhoods and all over the place, and we haven't even accounted for it, not at all. But I do think that we do need to take a really close look at it, make sure we have plenty of guest parking, even with snow storage. So I do think that the applicant has taken a look at that. I do think that there is some work to be done and some massaging of the plan to get it where it needs to be. But one thing that needs to be understood by everybody in the room, the applicant is proposing to set aside 19 parking stalls to help relieve some of the pressure with the existing on-street parking. That is not something the city legally can require or obligate of an adjacent property owner. So that is a goodwill effort on the part of this proposal. So keep that in mind.
Thanks. A couple other questions. So the owner occupied restriction came up. Can you clarify how that works? It's 2 years owner occupied. After that 2 years, if they sell, can it sell to anybody, or does it have to be another owner occupied?
It has to be another.
So it has to be another
Correct.
owner occupied.
And it starts over.
And is this 100% for every townhome in there, and every home has to be owner occupied?
That is the vision. Now, we did have a conversation with the Planning Commission and City Council a couple weeks back on this specific topic. And one of the things that the Planning Commission and City Council recognizes is that with a live work unit, it's harder to require an owner occupancy when with a live work unit, we really don't want to see a vacant commercial space. That is probably not something we want to see. And so, one of the things that we thought was if we can get tenancy in those commercial spaces, then maybe we would allow for the live portion to be rentable as well, but conditioned on occupancy in the commercial space.
Okay.
But the vision of the general plan had always been 100% of the units would be owner occupied with that restriction. But one of the things that we also recognize is that if you get your foot into the real estate market, that is your first step in the American dream. You own your first piece of property. If you have the ability to hold on to that piece of property and convert it into your first asset, we want to give people that opportunity. So if the way that the deed restriction is structured, currently drafted to be structured, is if you purchase the property, you have to owner occupy it for 2 years before you're even eligible to convert it into a rental. But if you sell it, that deed restriction comes back on in perpetuity to the next buyer. So the next buyer has to owner occupy it before they then become eligible to rent that property. We also talked about a cap in the number of units within the property that could convert into rentals at about I forget what we had talked about, maybe a 25-75 split, where it's a first come, first serve. And if the first generation of owners, 25 out of 100 of them converted into a rental, then it's capped. And you'd have to get on a waiting list to then, become one of those 25%. The idea there being that we want to preserve the character of that neighborhood and not have it convert into more of a rental neighborhood than an owner neighborhood. There was a statistic thrown out there that 33% of the Cove is owner occupied. That may be true. I don't know. We don't have data here at the city to corroborate that, but it could be possible that is the case. Hard to know.
Tends to happen in the townhomes.
One other thing I just want to bring up that we talked about when we talked about the limiting the number of rentals is this will be an HOA, and the HOA itself can determine a percentage too. Just like the one I live in, we have determined a percentage that only 14 of our 116 homes can be rented. So, so the HOA could also.
And this is where we talked about Bear River Association of Governments gets involved to help the HOA enforce that.
Yeah.
Okay.
We all recognize that this owner occupancy does nothing if you can't enforce it. Without enforcement, it's worthless, right? And so we understand this needs to be a very simple, replicatable, and enforceable mechanism. And we've talked with Bragg because they are the housing authority for Cache County. They've signaled their willingness and their understanding that it is their role to enforce housing policy. But we don't want to leave it to Bragg to monitor and enforce. So we have talked about a multi-level, multi-layered enforcement mechanism where every project that is in the city center will be under a master HOA, professionally managed, and they have the first line of enforcement on this requirement. Beyond that, Bragg will monitor, keep an eye on what is being done in each of these neighborhoods that has a deed restriction. They'll follow reporting, and it'll be the first level of enforcement. And if we find somebody out of compliance, it would come to the city for our traditional co-enforcement mechanisms where we can lien properties, issue daily fines, those types of measures. But I think that having many eyeballs on it, on a simple process, many eyeballs, I'm hoping that we can maintain a very high level of owner occupancy.
Okay, great. One more question, and then I'll make a statement to be done. But the canal trail easement was brought up. We didn't really talk about that. I think from what I saw in the plans, there is a planned easement on the east side along the twin ditches. Is that right?
That is correct. And then if you pay attention, that canal trail is actually being installed here shortly. The city was awarded grant funding through the state.
Okay.
And so we'll see that canal trail improve.
And that'll connect from 2200 to 25.
All the way up to the city offices, behind Greenville.
Okay, great.
So that connection will be made. Even if we didn't have grant funding and this were to come through, it would have been a requirement of the developer to install that as well. But I think it'll be a tremendous secondary access for pedestrians, school kids walking over to Greenville, much safer.
My kids down there.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So again, I like to zoom out. And looking at the surrounding areas, you've got the RE1 that was mentioned. It sounds like that's been there for a long time. But as you keep going east and even north, you've got the R112, which is a 4 times density over the RE1. And then I think if I've done my math right, that the cottages along the canal would be like a 6 times density. So it's not a ton more than the R112s. You got the Sage Hills going in over there, so there's density coming in on that side over there as well. And I think the RE1s, where this is part of that residential core 1, or is it 2? It's 1.
2.
It's 2.
On the east side of the canal.
On the east side of the canal, residential core 2. Those RE1s are opportunity for infill development sometime eventually, right? So I think that again, I'm trying to zoom out and look at the whole picture there. The RE1 almost looks like a pocket zone where it's at. It's been there forever, so it's not that it was a bad decision. It's just that's the way that the cookie is crumbled, the way it's gone. And then, so zooming out again, I think that a mixed use city center zone here makes sense. My concerns with this particular development are a lot of the same things, right? It's the green space in the middle. It's the density of the units. I think the 3-story townhomes is the product we've been looking for, so I'm not necessarily opposed to that. I want to make sure we get the architecture right. Vistas is a concern, right? I think it may be possible to do like a line of sight or a view analysis from different elevations on how how those go, because the further away you are from a tall building, the smaller it looks, and the more that the view is preserved. So I'd like to see if there's some way to visualize that. And then parking, traffic, let's make sure we follow through on those. So I share a lot of the similar concerns with the development itself, and share concern with the citizens too. We want to get this one right. So I think that the intent is good. I want to make sure that we set the right precedents going forward.
Similar to Porter, I have those concerns, and I'm really grateful for people who submitted comments on email and spoke tonight to those issues as well. I think one of the things that's hard about North Logan is that we love our open space and that we love a rural agricultural feel. But if we don't do some density, then it's all going to be single family homes everywhere and we'll lose that feel. This feels a little too dense for me at this point. And that transition of that one row of yard buildings feels not quite adequate in my mind. But I think that we're in the right direction, but we're not there yet.
Great. Thank you to staff, obviously the committee, certainly to the citizens, obviously the people who live close and are affected most by these issues. Find it very meaningful to hear your thoughts and to share your experience of living in that space. And I hope you believe that it doesn't fall on deaf ears. Scott, thank you. I mean, a great analysis. This is a difficult challenge to implement after years of process, condensed down into a manageable code that gives you guys some assurances and gives developers and landowners certain understanding about how to do it. I can't tell you how many times I drive around in multiple communities wherever I am, and I say, who made that decision? Right? Why did that happen? And I think I couldn't concur more with your statements and your maybe even requests to just think through it, right? And make sure that we don't make a mistake. I think by design, that's what zoning is supposed to do. So it's discouraging when we hear that we did screw it up. Right? And hopefully we have learned from those challenges. So that's all I have to say.
Want to say anything? Are you ready for a motion?
I'm good, yeah.
I had one more thought, which
Sure.
was, so density is a concern here, particularly with the townhomes and the cottages along the canal. And so if we were to take this and modify it, what do we think on density? I'm thinking you got 140 townhomes in there. I'm thinking somewhere no less than a 20% decrease, which would put you at about 120, 110. That's probably maybe not enough, but I would say we need to maybe start there as a number. And then I don't know what the requirement is on the cottages themselves. That's kind of I guess maybe for density, you would go with less cottages. There's 8 now, right? You'd go with less in order to get a better transition or a less striking transition, I guess. But I don't know. I wanted to see what you all thought about reduction in density. If we want to look at a number, or if we just want to maybe.
Will you add another row of those cottages and take out some of the?
I think design will drive density.
20% sounds good to me, but
As a starting point, and maybe if we're going to think more about this, maybe we don't need to decide it now.
we can at least give a suggestion. I think
Sure.
it's good to give a suggestion.
Okay.
I like the suggestion of both the maybe more cottage homes and a reduction of townhomes too. I like that.
Okay.
You ready?
Good.
I'm prepared to make a motion. I'd like to make a motion to table the Ashbourne Mixed-Use City Center Rezone and Master Development Plan until a traffic impact analysis has been reviewed and allow staff to work with the developer with changes including, but not limited to, number of parking spaces, density, amount of open space, common area, consideration of variation in colors and architectural elements of townhouses, architectural renderings of yard homes, and anticipating taking further action at a further future meeting.
I second that.
Point
Any
A.
clarification?
Go
You're
ahead.
going to require the developer to come with architectural renderings or concept renderings?
At this
The
point,
staff
it's-
report says architectural renderings.
At this point, it's whatever is needed to communicate the intent. So they don't need to have fully engineered
Not
architectural. No, as long as you have an understanding of the intent, I think that's what.
Well, I
need
think
at
we
this
had
point.
pictures of the front, and we just would
That's
like to see.
conceptual. That's not schematic.
Yeah, and we didn't have
point.
anything on the cottages either.
Right,
So.
right.
Yeah, good point of clarification.
Okay. So with that clarification, I will support
Right.
that.
And any other conversation on the motion? We have a motion and a second. All right, let's take a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, there we go. Thank you again to all those who have come to the town meeting today. Scott, we've got a work session item.
So this item is a work session. Folks are welcome to stay. You're welcome to go. This is an informal discussion on a unrelated topic to this one that we just had. But up to you if you'd like to stay for a minute. We'll just give a minute for the room to clear out if
Yep.
that's okay.
So
There was never 5 stories. The 5 stories is in the main part of the city center.
In the staff, he took that right out of the general plan. So the 5-story would go in the city center area. The commercial is 2 stories, and the townhomes were 3, which would be as tall. But a height.
So, hey, we're still in meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is. I'm like, we have like trick of the airport over, so I get where we like have to go down. Okay, but 5 stories.
Scott's occupied too. So.
Thanks for coming.
I didn't get what you said.
All right, let's transition to item 3 on the agenda, our work session, miscellaneous land use matrix amendment. Scott.
Yeah, this can be really fast. This is kind of just a cleanup type of an item that staff has reviewed. Our zoning matrix. There's a few things I think we need to talk about just as a miscellaneous update to the land use tables. You guys may be familiar with the matrix. We looked at this with our 2500 North Gateway amendments. This is a cleaned up version with the city council having adopted that amendment at last night's meeting. This is now a cleaner.
But Scott, I feel we need to leave the door open for open meetings, but
Oh, I don't know that we need. They can come in. It's not locked. It's not locked.
I'd
so-
prefer it stay open while we're in meetings. So I know.
It's hard when there's a lobby. It's a good
Yeah.
mingling space.
He'll get it. We can.
It's kind of hot to have him wait outside.
All right. I think we're good.
All right, go ahead.
Okay, so the land use matrix in the code, this matrix is broken out into multiple sections because the codified code, the format is much skinnier to fit, a normal size, 8 by 11 paper. And so in the code, the codified code, we have this split into the residential zones, a table for the residential zones, a table for the commercial zones, a table for the mixed use zones, and so on and so forth. But I have this working matrix. This is the matrix as it's adopted per the council's action last night. And it's helpful to see all of our zones and all of our land uses in a single table. Allows us to do maybe a little bit better of an analysis of where things are permitted versus where they're not permitted. And you'll notice that in the work session item, we put in this as, hey, we're just kind of looking at some of the problematic land uses, such as data centers, adult-oriented businesses, tattoo and body piercing parlors, vape and smoke shops, those types of things that we just want to have maybe a closer eye on. And to be clear, the majority of the things that I just mentioned are not permitted uses in our land use table. In fact, all of them are not permitted. But as we know, this last several months, data centers has been a hot topic in the news and here locally, and we don't have a line item in our code to address data centers. And I'm not that concerned about it because we don't have the water to even provide for a data center, so it's really not that concerning. But when you understand that data centers come in many different scales, we're talking hyperscale out west, right? But there's small data centers that are smaller than warehouses, and there's things that are much smaller that still require some consideration from a land use perspective. So it's one of those things that we think we should add into the code, define more specifically, and have maybe an understanding of how we would treat that type of a use if it were to come into the city. I haven't added this to the code yet. I haven't added any definitions. Staff has been busy the last couple weeks, so I'd hope to have a little bit more to discuss tonight. But that is the intent, that we open a formal file to talk about these uses. And specifically, there's two matrices. There's matrices. There's one in the code, obviously, and there's also one in the form-based code, and they're separate because they're treated differently. But there is something in the form-based code, land use tables, that we need to maybe just be aware of. When you look really closely, there's a few uses that maybe we should have been a little bit more aware of when we adopted the code. One is the rental service stores. We talked about the scale of a potential rental service store out west. I think that's probably an inappropriate scale for the city center. Further down, you'll see that there is a mention of a tattoo-piercing parlor. And that, if you look even further down in the code, we actually specifically had indicated that it is prohibited use, but we didn't clean it up in the table. So it's just an oversight. So we want to just be explicitly clear that some things were not intended, and that is one. I think a shooting range and an archery range, even if they are indoor in the city center, still isn't quite going to work well. I know you can do indoor, shooting ranges that are, they contain the noise and it's a safe environment. It requires ventilation and all sorts of considerations. I just don't know that fits in our city center. So that's one we want to clean up. The tattoo and piercing parlor, even though we are clear that it's not permitted, it still is in the table. So we'll clean that up as well. So the other thing I wanted to talk about is banks and financial institutions. And those, you don't really think that's a problematic use, but to be quite honest, they're a bit of a dead land use. And we actually, not to cast shade on any of our financial institutions in town, we do have an intersection with a bank on Four Corners. And we saw that and we're like, hey, these are good looking buildings. They've got great landscaping. They're not, poor neighbors, but is that the right land use for some of our commercial corridors? On 2500 North, I don't know that it is. I don't know that we want to occupy any of those spaces with a banking institution. When we went through the general plan update and then the subsequent land use code update, the big overhaul update, we were very specifically defining some of the payday lending, short-term lending, pawn brokerage types of financial institutions. And what we found out is they're actually defined differently under the state code. Some are short-term lending, some are payday lending, some are title loan, collateral title loan. I forget the terminology. But we pulled some of those out, defined them specifically, and said, hey, we don't want to see pawn shops in certain areas, and we don't want to see payday lending in certain areas. But I think beyond that, the bigger question is, do we really need another credit union or bank on 2500 North or on Main Street? And I think that's something we just need to have an open discussion about, how many more fit or need to be accommodated in our limited commercial spaces. So that is a point of discussion, I think, that we'll have in the next little bit. But do you guys have any thoughts on that initially?
I have a question about that, just Thinking about in Lee's, in that strip mall where there's that little Wells Fargo,
Mhm.
that feels very unobtrusive and appropriate there.
Sure.
So thinking, is there a difference between a standalone bank building or part, like, do we define that or is it just blanket? How does that work?
Does it have a lobby? Does it not have a lobby? Is it inside of the grocery store? Is it outside of the Yeah, good question.
Because I agree. I don't think that Wells Fargo is problematic at all, right?
Mm-mm.
I'd rather see a lending institution like that than the payday, short-term lending type things.
Sure.
I'm also picturing like, not that this may ever happen, but like a Cache Valley Bank, right? They've got some really nice buildings down on Main Street, so something like that feels very appropriate for 2500 North.
But they have one at
Aesthetically, I think you're right. It'll blend in just fine.
So is it a question of use or is it a question of form?
I think it is use.
Yeah, it's more along the lines of it takes that corner space and basically kills any nightlife or weekend life.
Gotcha. Okay.
And so I mean, they're good neighbors.
Yeah.
We all probably have a bank account, right? I mean, so
Okay.
they're good to have, but it's from a land use perspective and from a I'll say a tax generation, because we have to be conscious of that. If we don't have enough commercial and enough retail and enough generating income tax
Yeah.
or sales tax, sorry, then the burden of maintenance will fall on the homes, and our property taxes will go up. And so leaving potentially higher traffic spaces for higher tax generating uses is good planning policy in my perspective.
That makes sense. I'm with you.
Well, and also I think people go into the bank so much less than they used. I mean,
It's true. It's all online now.
I don't think my kids ever go to the bank.
It's changed over
What's
the
a
last couple
dollar
of
bill?
decades for sure.
Yeah.
So
The thing is that I don't mind like the one. What is it? The one Chase or something that's in Fred Meyer. I still call it Fred Meyer in Smith Marketplace, but I mean something inside something.
Well, like even that strip mall next to Lee's, I'm like, it's just one little storefront, which feels different to me than a standalone whole thing.
I still think my mind's changed. If the goal is the use or the vibrant neighborhood, again, nightlife, like I think a bank period doesn't fit now. So
Yeah, and if you'll recall, we several years ago, it's been about 4 years ago now, we first started thinking, okay, we've really got to be more protective of our commercial space because we recognized when we went through the general plan and even prior, we are an infill community. We are unique in Cache County. We are one of the very few. There's only one other, and that's River Heights, that is landlocked, and we have to treat ourselves as an infill. And from a sustainability perspective, we need to kind of think about if we're going to go fishing for businesses and economic development opportunities. Some are higher producing than others, and it's not that a bank doesn't produce economic benefit. That's circulating commerce and providing for financial services. That's great. But on 2500 North is that the land use that we're looking to fill that space.
Yeah.
And if we were to really look at, we could probably do like a parcel by parcel analysis to say, what is the percentage of parcels that are used up by a financial institution on our commercial corridors? I think we would be surprised, especially if we look at intersections. We've got a lot of intersections that are occupied by a banking institution. So I don't want to make it sound like we're concerned about a bank at all. It's more.
Yeah.
Just a priority.
In the 2500 North corridor, I agree.
And when you look at the images in the general plan for the vision, they're multi-story. They're the scale is much bigger than you would assume a bank to be. Maybe it's a secondary use inside of a primary building. Maybe it's a tenant inside of a building. But occupying and taking up an entire parcel, especially on a key corridor or intersection, I think is something we need to be more aware of.
And it's very common in higher density areas where you have a store, a convenience store, a clothing store, a bank, right in a commercial on the first floor. That's very typical in higher density areas. But in these.
Yeah.
We agree.
We pulled out storage units about 4 years ago. We said, hey, no more warehousing up against the corridor. We've now said no warehousing, period, within 330 feet of the corridor. And I think that we're heading in the right direction there. The what?
Car washes, did you say?
Car washes have been out of the code for quite some time, mostly because it's a water concern more than anything. We pulled that out many years ago. Anyways, we're a unique community. We can't leave everything in our land use code that maybe other communities can because there are appropriate areas. We're kind of getting to the point now where some uses really are, you have to look at the opportunity cost and the long-term impact versus benefit.
On the data center use, you aware of the proposed data center in Logan, and you're watching that?
On the west side, well, they do have a moratorium in place.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know the status of how far along in the entitlement process. they made
That's
it.
something I'd be curious to see how they handle that and what they decide, and maybe a lesson learned for us.
Yeah.
Do we even have anywhere in our?
Well, I think it fits in the industrial zones.
No, but do we have enough room? They are.
Oh well, no, these
they
are the
don't.
micro.
Some of the smaller ones.
Oh, they're talking to smaller.
They're talking
ones?
micro ones, like warehouse type.
Oh.
There's even been a concept of having like data centers, like a generator or an AC unit at houses, so you outsource into much smaller areas. So they're trying to get creative, and so we have to watch. These small data centers are going to become a thing, but they're going to be very different than anything we've ever seen.
Yeah,
in terms of
they're down to micro scale now, where they put them in a freight container with air conditioning units attached to them, and they can plunk them down anywhere for temporary use.
Yeah.
They could fill up an entire field with them.
So I
if you
totally
wanted
see
to.
something like that in the industrial zone.
Also, many larger employers are going to have data centers,
Local
right?
data
that are dedicated to their organization's use, not selling that compute outside. And so, the university and some of our larger employers are going to have data centers. Now, you could, as you write the code, you might be able to say, this many watts of consumption, and that's a metric you could use, and if it's water cooled or air cooled or things along those lines, as you look for your definition.
Yeah, and I think you're right. The power requirements is kind of where the scale is defined. We have a little bit of research that we've started working on. I think this is new enough, but it's not brand new to where there is some best practices out there that we'll look into. But anyways, that's the intent behind this text amendment that we're going to start working on. But as you kind of drive around town, kind of take note of the uses that exist already, and I think maybe soda shops is next on the list of things to be concerned about.
Oh, you can't have enough soda shops.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm being picky, but anyways, that's the intent. We'll put more pen to paper on this with some more defined terms and some red lines to look at a future meeting. Okay.
Yep.
If you want a homework assignment and you're bored, you're welcome to study the land use table, and if you feel like anything else needs to be adjusted while we're at it, now's a good time to do so. Yep, that's what I have for you.
Great, thank you. Any other staff business or discussion?
Yeah, real quick, the APA Fall Conference is coming up September 9th and 10th. That is a Wednesday and a Thursday down in Layton.
Send an email, right? You sent an email.
Yeah.
Can I piggyback on that real quick, Scott?
Yeah.
So I work with the APA programs portion. So we're looking for a lot of stuff for planning commissioners. So if you guys have any ideas of what a planning commissioner should know coming in, if you could let me know. We're trying to do like a citizen planner 101, planning commissioner 101 type thing. They just asked us to advertise that to you guys. If you have any ideas of what to include in that, that'd be great. We're also trying to work on a session for you guys at the conference that Scott just mentioned. So if you have any ideas, let me know. That'd be great.
They're trying to put together a whole track that is dedicated to planning commissioner responsibilities and duties and those types of things. So,
and it'll also help you get your training requirements.
Could you remind us
how many we have?
Yeah, what we're in need of.
Let me show you. We have a tracker for our annual training.
I know I have to do that. Okay.
You are required to do 4 hours of training every year, but one of your hours is if you attend, 12, I think is how many meetings a year, which most of the time we're able to get anyways. But so three hours are needed, and then one of those hours has to be your Open and Public Meetings Act training, your annual training for OPMA. And so you really just need 2 hours of general training at minimum, but obviously we would recommend getting as much as you have time for. If you look in the Planning Commissioner folder, and normally, like right now, we're in the 26 meetings, but if you go out, if you go up one level in the file system, then you'll go to the calendars, or sorry, not the calendars, the training folder, Planning Commission training, and you'll go to 26. And you've got your individual folders, which is any certificates you guys have earned throughout the year. But really, you're just looking at this tracking sheet, and it'll tell you how many folks have. Yes, Nan is crushing it. She's doing great. Teresa, you're doing well. Porter, you're doing.
about Open Public Meetings Act.
Mhm.
Do you will you send that out when it's up, or is it just do it once a year? How does
You
that
just do
work?
it once.
Once a year.
Okay, so at any point in time.
Mhm. Yep.
So I'm
There.
done with that.
Yeah, you are. There was a change in the state legislature this year where we do technically need to include some ethics training every year. Somebody thought there was some fishy business going on in some planning commissions around the state, so they thought we should give you some ethics training. Anyways, but yeah, attending a conference is a great way to knock out a lot of these things. The early bird deadline is July 25th. We won't meet again before that deadline, so this is your reminder. If you want to go, let me know. Even if it's for a day or half a day, we can get you registered for whatever you have time for. I don't know that there's going to be an online option. I haven't seen anything about an online option. But
Who said no?
Yeah.
Those are.
I talked with Nicole today. There's no online option as of right now. There might be sometime in the future, depending on availability and people's interest. But as of right now, there's no online option.
Aaron, those are both all day. It's 2 full days. Okay.
And where is it again?
Layton.
Layton.
There is a possible social that we're going to do on Wednesday night at the Hill Air Force Base Museum. So if that incentivizes you to come.
Does that count as training? Because
I don't think that does. That's just a social. But
all right.
I will join you. I love that place.
Yeah, me too. I'm in.
It's amazing.
It's great. Go check out the Blackbird.
Anyways, that's all my business that we have for you, staff business.
All right, thanks. Do any of the planning commissioners have any business or discussion?
Let's go home.
None?
Adjourn us,
Okay.
please, sir.
So next meeting's August 6th. We're on for that one.
August 6th is our next one. We may have this item back before us. I kind of wonder if we're going to need to give them a few weeks to massage, retool, come back with maybe some updated information, but there's a possibility that we'll hold another meeting on that discussion. We did notice this one item for a public hearing. It may not be a bad idea to go ahead and have a second public hearing. You're not required to, welcome to, it's up to your discretion.
We just did?
Mm-hmm. If you do decide to have another public hearing, I think it would be wise to let people know if you've had a turn, then maybe let the others in the audience have a turn. But if you have more to say, you certainly can take the time. But it's up to your guys' discretion. You're only required to do one, but the more, I'm sure, is not a negative outcome. So
They get information on it only if we notice it, like that they had staff report to go through. Does that only go out, or they can access it?
So we will not issue a public notice to everybody adjacent to the property like we do for the first public hearing. We will obviously put it on the agenda. The agenda goes out to the Utah Public Notice website. It's on our website as well, but we don't do the same mailed notices for each successive hearing.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Okay.
Anyways, we'll see. We'll see where they're at.
Do you anticipate a meeting on the 20th or?
Hard to know. I don't think so,
Okay.
as it stands today, but who knows? The 22nd or the 20th?
The 6th is very sketchy for me.
Okay.
We'll see. I'll keep you posted.
Any other hard constraints on scheduling that you guys know of yet?
Not that I'm aware of. No.
Okay.
Potential conflict with the 6th, but it's not hard.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure what Nan's availability is, but we'll see.
All right. Well, thank you. If there's no objection, we'll adjourn.
Thank you.
Thanks for your attendance and patience and willingness to listen, and